Hey, they are. Crave Assembly is talking about the Total War Warhammer 3 6.1 patch. It's been a minute since I've recorded a video. I've been busy with various things, and honestly, by now, I think if you watch this channel, you're probably pretty used to the irregular upload schedule of more or less only uploading whenever Crave Assembly does something and just talking about that. So, here you go. I believe this is going to be, yep, right there it says Kislev. So this is going to, I assume, be about the Kislev Cathay Zinch updates. Basically, the second We're Sorry About Shadows of Change update. So that's going to be, okay, I'm going to be very interested in this. I just recently tried a Kislev campaign for a little bit, and I was shocked again by just how underdone. I mean, not underdone. They're very done. Underwhelming their tech tree is, how underwhelming their faction abilities are. That they're still balanced by Warhammer 3's launch balanced style. Sorry, fixing a little bit of dust off the webcam. Which that's a pretty good comedic illustration of how rarely I upload YouTube videos, but nonetheless, the mechanics for the race for power between Katarina and Kastalton is a bizarre mechanic that doesn't really fit. Spending so much of the piety resource, or whatever it's called, faith, I don't remember, for the rituals just is pretty underwhelming. So I'm very curious to see that. Cathay and Zinch, I wouldn't think would require too much changes, though I'm still excited to see what they do. And they start by talking about the AI beta. They say that we can expect the update to arrive in mid-March. Okay, that's pretty close. That's pretty soon. And the AI beta will close on February 28th, which is tomorrow. And the survey will stay open for a while. I don't. It doesn't seem to be any indication of when they plan to actually fully implement any AI changes, but they are going to hopefully set a date for the next beta round. Okay, more changes to the AI. Okay, all right. Talking with William Hackstad, I guess. I'm definitely not gonna pronounce that properly. I can't. I'm no good with Scandinavian names. Nonetheless, that looks, well, Scandinavian and not Eastern European. So there's been questions of, does Crave Assembly plan to hand over the Warhammer 3 development to CA Sophia at some point? And I guess they at least haven't handed the game designer role over to CA Sophia. Either which way doesn't make a difference to me, because CA Sophia's work is good. So I'm perfectly fine with them taking over on Total War Warhammer. Alright, let's see. They, okay. First of all, they're splitting the three Legendary Lords into standalone pack. Okay, so they're retroactively changing Shouts of Change to work the same way that Throne of Decay and Forces of Destruction, was that the name of the Ogres, Greenskins, Corn DLC? I think it was. They're retroactively changing Shouts of Change to behave like those DLCs, where if you want to, you can now purchase the Changeling without purchasing the other two races' Legendary Lords, or vice versa for each of those. You know, if you want UN Bow without getting the other two. So that's good. That's good. More choices, definitely better. I like that. And they're also taking an opportunity to revisit a pain point that was raised with the original release. Oh, excuse me. Yeah. They're trying to take a crack at dealing with existing content in lieu of new content, because fans complained about that. Kislev certainly was in need. That is a rather noticeable thing. That, as exciting as each of the DLCs are, it's really the exciting thing with a lot of the DLCs is okay, what vanilla updates are they going to come with? The I've only just now looked down at that image. Let me scroll up so it doesn't distract me. With Throne of Decay, and then the update that came between Throne of Decay and Forces of Destruction, they fundamentally changed the way that the dwarfs played in a way that I thought was awesome. And I'm pretty excited for this update between updates here, because the Deeps system for the dwarfs I thought was absolutely brilliant. I loved it. I thought it was a huge game changer to the way the dwarfs played that encouraged you to play more like what the dwarfs really should play. That is to say, building tall and building up slowly, but eventually building the best cities in the game. I would say that logically, going by Warhammer Fantasy lore, really only maybe the High Elves or the Chaos Dwarfs should be coming close to building as great of cities as the mainline dwarfs. And even then, I'm not for certain. So, and I like the further deviation of having some races build tall, some races build wide. I think that's an important thing for making the various factions replayable. So you can mix it up and get different pacings with each campaign, rather than just every race having roughly the same kind of building tree and goals, but, they get some different faction abilities. That's not my style. I think that a lot of what you can really do to change up Total War Warhammer gameplay has a lot to do with just the building trees for settlements. But nonetheless, let's get on to the actual news. So, each of the pieces of the content in this article at various stages of development, so don't laugh if you see work in progress UI elements and the such, which I've already laughed at one work in progress UI element, but I think they wanted you to laugh at it. Okay, so for Kislev, they are the headliner. This was said ahead of time. Kislev is the one out of Cathay, Kislev, Tzeentch. Kislev is the one that is in the roughest state campaign-wise. They've not got a lot going on that feels like it substantially changes the game. They have a lot of buttons they can press, but the buttons don't really feel like they do a whole lot. So they will be interrogating the core features. I hope they don't waterboard them. That'd be nasty. And bring them up to snuff rather than focusing on a specific faction or character. So without too much preamble. Okay, so they're not going to focus too much on trying to give Katarine or Kistalton or Boris unique mechanics, though given that they're apparently keeping the supporter race here, that does mean that logically Katarine, Kistalton, and Boris are still going to be having somewhat unique campaign mechanics, just by dint of the fact that they're going to be partaking in that election mechanic in a way that other Kislev Legendary Lords won't. And of course, Boris, for his part, isn't even necessarily trying to win the election. He just has different benefits that come from supporting either side of it. So, it says up front the supporter race is no more. Okay, well, there goes everything I just said. They are looking at how they want to approach Kislev in a 2.0 core feature set. Conclude they want to wipe the slate clean, keep the themes and ideas intact, but shed the baggage of the existing system. Core of the new feature is still building support for the two dominant institutions within Kislev. So that's still the supporter race. You've just changed the mechanic to be less doofy. But the end goal and process are significantly changed. So this is why I laughed. Chill, dude. But, okay, just looking at the UI elements here, we've still got the supporter race going on at the top. But then, and it seems that it builds up a resource they can spend, one being an Ice Court resource and the other being an Orthodoxy resource. And then it looks like, rather than the old 4 rituals for the 4 major gods of Kislev, there are now 5 sets of rituals, 5 sets of 4 rituals each. Which I assume these are all, very much work in progress names and symbols. As much as I would love for Chill Dude to stick around, it'd be stupid, but it'd be great, wouldn't it? And apparently you can build up support for the Ice Court or the Orthodoxy as what looks like Well, this is very obviously a work in progress because they're testing this out as Grease's Skulltooth, as you can see in the top right. So he logically shouldn't be able to do that. But I can assume this means that rather than Katarine only wanting to build up support for the Ice Court, forget the Orthodoxy, or vice versa, now both Katarine and Kostaltin benefit from building support for either the Ice Court or the Orthodoxy, and can then spend the resources they get from that on the various rituals, with some rituals being Ice Court themed and others being Orthodoxy themed. That's interesting. I have to imagine there's a downside, though. My apologies. I have to imagine there's a downside to supporting whichever side of the supporter race. Well, it's not even really a race anymore. Apparently, whichever side of the dichotomy is not the one that is represented by your faction. Maybe if you build up too much Orthodoxy support as Katarine, you'll get public order or growth debuffs. Or maybe the inverse. The higher your Ice Court support is, the more public order and growth you get. Not sure. So, using the new system, you will accrue support for either side of the conflict via a variety of actions, including fielding relevant units, really. So you can build up support by recruiting units. That's interesting, to generate a resource by recruiting units. Ordinarily, you spend resources to recruit units, but that does make sense in this case. The more Ice Guard or stupid Frost Drakes, I hate those things, but nonetheless, they do exist. So, Frost Drakes you recruit, you're going to be building up support for the Ice Court, while conversely, if you recruit, let's say, Warbear Riders, or who else could you say is Orthodoxy themed? Maybe Tsar's Guard, but even that I doubt. But the more of those you recruit, the more of their respective support resource you generate. Anyways, using thematically aligned agents, which I assume that the Hag Witches will not be contributing to. Constructing buildings and dedicating your Ottomans. I hope the Ottoman mechanic has been changed at least a little bit. I'd love to get an Ottoman per province rather than per 2 provinces. I feel like that's just too limiting. Nonetheless, that is very cool. I'm curious how the constructing buildings things will go. I guess they'll be, if we assume that the building tree hasn't changed, which would be fine by me because I think Kislev is a very cool building tree, then I would assume that building Orthodoxy temples generates Orthodoxy support, while building Ice Court, Ice Witch, Frost Maiden recruitment buildings will generate Ice Court support. As you raise your support, you will receive boons from these major factions, presenting you a secondary progression mechanic to let you get powerful benefits. Curry favor with the Orthodoxy to improve your common line troops, strengthen your economy, and improve your invocations. Support the Ice Court to improve your elite infantry, spellcasting, and hero usage. Okay, so people are going to prioritize the Orthodoxy every time. Economy and common line buffs are going to be the top of the line buffs every time. Though if the two are not mutually exclusive, then people will be perfectly happy to improve both. A key change here, however, is that there's no longer a race. Instead, supporting only one side of the conflict can cause rising unrest and invite disorder into Kislev. In the face of the growing threat of chaos, Kislev must seek unity. Therefore, players are encouraged to balance the support they curry for each of the factions. So, okay, that's a lot more interesting than just having Katarina and Kostaltin be hostile to each other. In addition, it does fit more so the old 2nd edition RPG lore a little bit. They're still not going very much with the 2nd edition RPG lore like I really want them to. I'm forever going to miss the Gospodar Ungol racial divide. Ethnic divide, rather. But this does fit more so Katarine's depiction in terms of the politics present in the 2nd edition of the RPG's version of Kislev lore, where Katarine is not really aggressively trying to take power too much. She wants to take power, but she's doing it more subtly and trying to keep people pleased if she can. So this does make more sense as Katarine's way of handling Kostaltin. And conversely for Kostaltin, as much as Kostaltin is clearly presented as being suspicious of the Ice Court, that does not change that the Ice Court is a Kislevite tradition, going back 1,000 years. So it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense for Kostaltin, as some degree of Kislevite traditionalist, to just be pissing that away. Then again, I don't like the Grand Orthodoxy lore to begin with. I feel it contrasts too much with the pre-existing Kislev lore, but that's generally been... Kislev is definitely the race I'm least happy with in Total War Warhammer 3. That was introduced by Total War Warhammer 3. But a lot of that problems, besides the current gameplay stuff, they will apparently be fixed and replaced with more interesting stuff. My problems with Kislev primarily are lore stuff, and I think a few of the units are goofy. I hate the Frost Drake. Why would Kislev have access to a dragon? It doesn't make any sense. Nonetheless, devotion. Another aspect of the Kislev feature that they are changing. It's moving from a faction-wide resource to a provincial one, replacing control for Kislev. Okay, that is a game changer. Representing the fervor of the local populace, it acts like control, but can be spent on local invocations to temporarily boost a local province or to empower an army temporarily. A core tenet of the Kislev approach is that they are strongest at home and prefer well-settled core territories. That does make sense. Kislev is going to be facing the most pressure from outside sources. This could stand to make the Kislev campaign a little bit easier. And as many players are going to try Kislev first, that's a good thing. Kislev's campaign shouldn't be too easy. They certainly should be facing all kinds of external threats. Chaos should be beating on their door at all times, because that's how Kislev is in the lore. At the same time, it is a very awkward state for Total War Warhammer. New players are probably going to either try the Empire, Kislev, or Grand Cathay first. And out of those three, Grand Cathay's campaign is fairly easy, but the Empire and Kislev both have really difficult campaigns. Excuse me. Or at least Karl Franz, Katarine, and let's say Miao Ying. Out of those, Miao Ying her campaign is a little bit harder than Zhao Ming's, but it's still not too bad. Whereas comparatively, Karl Franz is running around trying to deal with every problem in the Empire, and he's spread way too thin for most of his campaign. Katarine has a bit of time to try and build up some degree of defense before she is being invaded by so many Chaos armies. So, giving Kislev some defensive buffs, I think makes a lot of sense to help that be a bit more manageable. I think that the Kislev AI probably won't make good use of it and will still get run over and annihilated pretty quickly. But I think that's ultimately fine because it ties into the thematicness for the Empire campaign, that they have to more or less deal with the fact that Kislev is going to break at some point. I hope that they still, for Kislev, keep the theme of reduced recruitment costs. I thought that was a really interesting way of running Kislev's campaign when I played them in the Realm of Chaos campaign, which Realm of Chaos campaign is not great, but nonetheless, I did enjoy, building heavily around the recruitment cost discounts that Kislev can get, because it allowed for me to my memory is that when I played Kislev in Realm of Chaos, I was able to stack up a lot of recruitment cost discounts, and on top of that, a lot of increased local recruitment slots. So I would, anytime I needed an army, just build one up, go do what I needed done with it, and then retire them to save money so I could generate cash. And I thought that was an interesting way to handle it for Kislev. To me, that seemed logical for Kislev and their lore, that they would need to be able to build up an army pretty well instantly to deal with the constant chaos incursions when they need to. And then I thought that was interesting in a way that was different from the other Total War Warhammer races. No other Total War Warhammer race really feels like they can that viably run a strategy of building and then retiring armies in that quick a span of time. So I thought it gave them a unique gameplay identity. With that said, I wouldn't be surprised if that's gone. If they want to focus more on encouraging the player to have lots of upkeep reducement. I can English good. If they want to encourage the player to have a lot of upkeep reduction buildings and a lot of local province or local region buffs to your armies, they probably won't emphasize the recruitment costs so much, just because they want you to have standing armies sitting around in your provinces rather than having the ability to just build an army out of nowhere. Anyways, yeah, a high-level devotion also allows Kislev to counteract the penalties of climates, allowing them significant settling flexibility in exchange for a slow ramp-up to suitability and making the territory unsuitable for using invocations. as these would immediately make the province take climate penalties again. Interesting. So Kislev does have still... So this... Kislev, I want to say in the game now, considers Chaos Wastelands unsuitable rather than uninhabitable. This will further encourage Kislev to be the race that, if they are really able to pick up steam and pick up power, they could hypothetically move from being the wall that holds chaos back but is struggling to colonizing the chaos wastes. I find that really interesting, and I like that way. I like that way of handling it. I'm curious to see what the invocations actually do, because Creative Assembly is not clarifying what exactly they do here. It is keeping a system, it is keeping a philosophy to the invocations and devotion that you could tell Creative Assembly liked to begin with at Warhammer 3's launch. The idea that there was this resource that you would want to spend from, but if you spent too much, you'd be punished. Because invocations, of course, devotion, if your devotion gets too low in the game right now, and if your devotion has gotten too low in any version of Warhammer 3 since launch, it would cause chaos invasions to start spawning in your land. But the player pretty well, that's just, I didn't like that design. I felt it was too much of a noob trap, because the player does not know where the threshold is that will lead to chaos spawns. And I remember that the first time I used an invocation in the Kislev campaign, it immediately put me below the line and had chaos armies start spawning in my territory. It felt like I wasn't being properly warned about it, and it taught me to be very conservative and not use Kislev's actual campaign mechanics. And that was generally a problem that I think Warhammer 3 had at launch, was that a lot of the faction mechanics felt like Creative Assembly didn't want you to use them. They wanted you to play just vanilla Total War. And I'm glad that we're figuring out ways to push away from that philosophy in a way where we can still keep interesting ideas that are related to it. Oh, excuse me. Ottomans! While the core idea of Ottomans is strong, they need to go further, I agree. Ottomans can no longer be permanently recruited onto the campaign map as a standard lord to lead an army. Yes, I could not figure out what the point of that was as a mechanic. There was no reason I could figure out why you would ever want to recruit an Ottoman. It's not like you were ever in a situation where, like, I can't recruit a regular boyar or ice witch. I need an Ottoman, damn it. So, yeah, I'm glad that's going. Ottomans now enable a new feature for settlements tentatively called Garrison Sally Attack, where you can command settlements managed by them to engage enemies within a limited distance, as if the settlements themselves were armies. Of course, the capital of the province is led by the Ottoman himself, who takes the field with the garrison during this attack. Does that mean that the garrison leaves as, like, under a lord with a banner on the campaign map, and you will see the army walk out of the settlement to go attack the guy? Or does it just simply mean that, excuse me, or does it just simply mean that the attack range of the city itself will be vastly extended? That's interesting, but that further enhances Kislev's capability to play defense. I do like that. I assume the trick will be to send out one of your armies close to that enemy army, and then tell a settlement to attack that army. That is interesting, though. There's already a mod that allows players to do that, though in a fashion of having the garrison leave the city as an army for about 5 turns before they go back to the garrison forcibly. I'm glad Creative Assembly took inspiration from that, seemingly. Or, well, I assume they took inspiration from it, otherwise it'd be kind of odd. But that is cool, and that is a much more logical way of handling the Ottoman being recruited as a lord, so that you don't feel like you're gimping yourself by doing it. Because you lost out on all of the Ottoman bonuses when you did recruit an Ottoman as a lord. It didn't make any sense to do it. So that's really cool. Ottomans now have a unique battle loadout, dropping the dual weapon loadout of the standard boyar for a staunch shield, axe, and pistol kit. Cool. Oh, I wonder if they'll be available. Ottomans will then be available in custom battles that way, in multiplayer battles, because that would be interesting to have an alternative loadout comparative. Because we've got the standard boyar kit, dual weapons. We've got the Druzina kit of great axe and bow, and then this guy would have another different setup. So you could have a defensive lord type, a lord type that's meant to fight in the melee against against armored enemies, and one lord type that's more so meant to chew through lightly armored targets. That could be interesting. Ottomans now have a skill tree and gain experience while administrating settlements, allowing them to improve their governing, strengthen their garrisons, and dedicate themselves to the sects to improve your support. Okay, cool. Huh. I wonder if that's replacing the previous Ottoman mechanic where they could gain different buffs they provided to the area, or if that's going to go on top of it, because that feels like that could get pretty strong pretty quickly. Either which way, yeah, that's very interesting. Okay, tech tree. Okay, this was part of the question was, are they going to keep the cities mechanic of the tech tree? I was really pretty fond of it in a sense, because I thought that it got across the lore that Kislev is heavily focused on the three great cities, because the oblasts beyond the three great cities of Kislev are small, provincial, parochial, whatever you want to say. Whereas the three great cities of Kislev, that being Kislev, Erengrad, and Prague, were all very much supposed to be really impressive metropolises that contrast with the idea of Kislev as this snowy backwoods hillbilly land. It would be cool if they could figure out a way to make it where taking the cities, you could still recruit the techs for, Prague without owning Prague. But if you own Prague, it speeds up the research speed of the associated techs. I don't know. Let's see what they actually did. Okay, so we've taken the Chaos Dwarf thing of splitting the tech tree into different branches. That's cool by me. I do like that mechanic with the Chaos Dwarfs. And it's split between land, people, and state. That does fit for Kislev lore. That's a rather frequent. It's kind of like the Empire, faith, steel, and gunpowder. Which, come to think of it, it'd be cool if somebody made a new Empire tech tree that split that way, faith, steel, gunpowder. Nonetheless, land, people, state, I assume that the state will be concerned with buffing cities and buffing your economy. The people, I assume, will be associated with buffing infantry units and cavalry. And the land, I assume, will be associated with buffing monsters, chariots, bear cavalry, maybe invocations? I don't know. Hang on, wait, it just occurred to me. If the invocations have been moved to a province per province level like this, then I see. So these, well, no, those were still rituals. I thought that these were going to be then buffs you get at different levels. Like if you get, excuse me. Sorry, excuse me. At level 2 of Gestalten support, Great Orthodoxy support, you get to give them Hail and Ice Ice Baby buffs. Good lord. And then at level 4, you get Hail to the King. At level 6, you get Break the Ice. But it's still listed as rituals. So is it a resource you spend? I don't know. I'm curious about this now. I guess we won't find out until we get our hands on the systems ourselves. Or a YouTuber does. Alright. So the goal with the Kislevite tech tree is to open up choices, make Kislev have a quite open and navigable tech tree, with many possible starts and short paths to end-of-the-line techs. With a variety of new and improved technologies. Bulwark of the Tsarina, for instance, which gives plus 10 armor and charge defense versus large for Zargard units. That's cool. It's going to suck for the mods that give Kislev pole arms, but nonetheless, that itself is cool. Technology is no longer locked behind owning the Kislev capitals. We felt this heavily incentivized early infighting in Kislev. It did, and it sucked for Boris. It really sucked for Boris. Okay, Tzeentch, fragments of sorcery. Whoa, what is this? Okay, Kislev is the main offering in the patch. There's also something for Tzeentch to chew on. The focus is on Kairos, who represents the intended standard Tzeentch experience, but the previous fragments of sorcery implementation wasn't quite up to snuff. So here's take two. From a gameplay angle, the feature needs little explanation. The core premise of this fragment of sorcery feature was versatility to build your own composite lore. The design quickly narrowed in on a true any combination you want feature that completely did away with the idea of an ancillary slot and moved the decision making to its own tab of the character detail panel. Okay. And they will showcase how the feature is visually concepted. Interesting. So they're going over the technical documentation that's into the UI team. Okay, so this is the look behind the curtain. So you can choose. The idea they had was be able to pick from. Okay, there's 4 sets of lores for each of Kairos' heads, and you could choose 2 spells at the common level, 2 spells at the uncommon level, and 2 spells at the rare level. So the idea was to make your own custom spell lore for Kairos. And while it outlines the technical requirements for the feature, it also highlights the flaws of a design translated from the original technical specs perhaps a bit too closely. Information overload is saying it lightly, yes. Okay, so then they have like a pentagram sort of deal here, where you could pick from a wheel of spells, and then they move to the 8-pointed Chaos Star, though with nothing on the side points. Okay, so we're seeing the iterations here of design internally. Okay, and here we can see that this spell slot, the idea would be that you could choose between the various basic spells of the various core 8 Winds of Magic spells. And there we go. There's a properly good-looking UI there. Kairos feature. Flavor text explaining how you can select the abilities from each head. That's the amusing thing about being able to see behind the curtain, is seeing the placeholder text. I'm always delighted by placeholder text. I don't know why. There's just something, I don't know, there's just something charming about it. The eye watches you, of course it does. Huh. Sorry I've not got much more commentary for this, because I'm just amused by this. And the twin heads of Kairos know 4 lores apiece, and the UI is designed to evoke this bit of lore. The selection wheel is rendered both without... Wait. Can you stay? Okay, then the wheel, though, what's the deal with the wheel? This isn't his spell selection in battle, is it? Huh. Well, either which way, I don't know how exactly this will... Oh, that's the wheel there. Okay, that's the selection wheel for each spot on the eye for what spells you want there. Okay. Okay, so Kairos now is going to work how people probably anticipated he was going to work, of build your own custom spell lore. That's really quite cool. There will probably more or less instantly be a meta to this. This is the sort of thing that Legend of Total War will take a look at and immediately go, okay, you want this spell, this spell, this spell, this spell, this spell, this spell. All the others are garbage, don't take any of them. But for people who like to have fun, there's a lot of possibilities there. That's really quite cool. Why doesn't the Changeling get this? Why should the Changeling get this? Should be the question. That should very distinctly be Kairos' unique mechanic. That's the core of his identity. Anyways. Changeling is a complicated topic. Here's where we stand today. So I'd like to see... The Changeling campaign is fun in a sense of it's overpowered and you can't lose. But he really shouldn't be that way. The Changeling should have a way that he can lose. And he should be less of a pain in the ass to fight. Good lord. Anyways. Changeling has resonated strongly with people in both negative and positive ways. A lot of intense discussion. The consensus isn't clear. There are some people who revel in his departure from regular structure of a campaign. And he sits close to a 50-50 split on play rate with Kairos, and he enjoys regular middle-of-the-road popularity on campaign pick rates. Internally, they've taken to calling him Marmite. You love him or hate him. And they'll be leaving things as they are for the Changeling. Okay. They will probably change him at some point. I think fundamentally with Changeling, what it is Changeling really just needs a lose condition, a failure condition. Technically, he has one now, but the player has to kill themselves to do it. And even then, you gotta try real hard to lose. He needs... I'm fine with it for the most part. I'm fine with the Changeling for the most part. But he needs to be easier to fight when you're not playing as him. There needs to be some kind of some more solid option to fight him as a player. And things need to be at least not quite so easy to keep your settlements, your cults, invincible to any real reproach. So, I'm not quite sure how to do it. Creative Assembly has been more or less making just unambiguously good changes ever since Throne of Decay. I've been pretty well happy with everything they've done since Champions of Chaos, personally, though that's a controversial stance to take. So I have confidence that if Creative Assembly wanted to make Changeling a campaign you can actually reasonably lose at some point, they would have a smart way of going about it and doing it and making it an interesting way of losing. Nonetheless, I'm not sure Creative Assembly does really care to have the Changeling campaign be any harder than it is, or make it any more simple to lose than it is. There are a variety of extremely overpowered campaigns in Total War Warhammer that have been that way since launch and not been changed. Ikit Claw, the moment that Prophet and Warlock came out, and anybody got to see Ikit Claw's campaign, that was the moment things changed, and it balance effectively went out the window, and there were just going to be some legendary lords that were going to have stupid easy campaigns. Which, I mean, I'll be honest, as much as Ikit Claw is annoying to fight when I'm playing the Cataf Southern Realms mod, and as annoying as it is to have it could drop nukes on me, there you go, if I can have an easy time saying that. As annoying as all that is, I do appreciate on some level that Ikit is one of the easy campaigns, just because Total War Warhammer, as it's progressed, and the map has filled with more and more legendary lords, the amount of easy campaigns has gone down with time, badly. Karl Franz used to be the campaign that everybody played first. Now, I would say never play Karl Franz first, because that's borderline suicidal. Most of the dwarf campaigns are pretty rough. They're surrounded by lots of big enemies. Kislev it has a lot of difficulties they have to face. Anyone who starts in the Southlands is going to be dealing with early game hell. So in a sense, I kind of appreciate that Ikit Claw is one of the guys that I can unambiguously point to and say, that guy has an easy campaign. If you are a beginner and you want an easy campaign to learn the ropes, Ikit Claw is one to go with. His campaign mechanics are weird because he's a Skaven, but nonetheless, he does not have to worry too much about losing, because his starting settlement is monstrous and he gets a bunch of buffs that make his armies crazy OP. I would prefer that there be an easy campaign that's not a Skaven, or a Beastman, or a Warrior of Chaos, or any of the races that are really weird. I would like if someone like the Empire, or Cathay, or the High Elves had a really easy campaign to go off of. And for the most part there is, because I can say, okay, Zhao Ming, the harmony mechanics are a bit weird, but Zhao Ming, that's an easy campaign. Tyrion, that's an easy campaign. But for the Empire, a lot of people are going to want to go for the Empire first. The Empire has the simplest campaign mechanics. And I would say the Empire has a lot of transferable skill, the way they build their campaign. With that said, they can fall back on just spamming artillery, but then again, every race in Total War Warhammer is going to have some cheap, easy way of winning that they can just fall back on. So, whatever, rambling over. I'm going to be done rambling with that. Free units. Oh, new units. A pair of new units. Cathay will be getting some kind of bomb-throwing unit at a, whatever picture this was taken as, an incredible upkeep discount. Good lord. 38 gold for Jade Crossbowmen. Whew. Cathay players wish they were paying that little. And, oh, Noblar Slingers! Sweet! I love these unit card art. They obviously can't keep it, but I'd love to see a version of Total War Warhammer 3 where all the unit card art is done like this. Oh, we're actually going to see them in action. Okay, Nangao Grenadiers. So it's going to be another. Are they just now? Is Crev Assembly just now taking up the stance that every update between updates is going to include free units? Because we've got, Goblin Swordsman, Orc Spearman, Graveguard with Halberds as free units, all in a rather short span of time. So, and now here comes two more. Huh. Anyways, yeah, Nangao Grenadiers. They, I assume, will be similar to Vampire Coast deck bombers with, or no, deck bombers would probably be the deck droppers with bombs, but the zombie deck hands with bombs. They will be, okay, Nangao Grenadiers will be a cheap grenade slinging infantry, vulnerable due to lower entity count, but armed with a significant stockpile of grenades to disrupt and destroy massed enemies. They carry a specialist stun grenade, which allows them to significantly impair the combat ability of all enemy units in a large radius once per battle. Okay, is that an ability like with Night Goblin Fanatics? Huh. Either way, that's interesting. That's going to be... The idea of a formation disruption unit for Cathay is pretty interesting, because Cathay is already the formation-focused army. So that's pretty interesting. I'm curious if they'll be able to throw the grenades over friendly units. I would imagine they would, because the zombie deckhands with bombs, I think it's more than fine as Vampire Coast to have those guys be in your front line, probably alongside some pistoliers. As Vampire Coast, I have never had success building the zombies that are actually intended for melee use. Whenever I have to make a front line as the Vampire Coast, I always go with either pistoliers or bombers, because zombies aren't going to do any damage in melee to begin with, even the ones that were designed for melee. And on top of that, they die pretty quickly and pretty easily. So I go for as many units when I'm playing Vampire Coast that can get off as many shots when the opponent is first charging as possible. And then whatever happens in melee, happens in melee. But for these guys, for the Nangao Grenadiers, they have a low entity count, so they're not going to want to be involved in the melee. They don't want to be sitting on the front line. So I would assume they can throw over your front line. You'll be deploying them in the back line to throw at the enemy as they approach your Peasant Spearmen or Jade Warriors. Curious what the stun bombs do, though. Because considering Cathay is already one of the races that likes to play around with buffs quite a bit for their own units, debuffing the enemy, there's potential there of having one of those situations where a low-tier unit beats a high-tier unit just through the amount of buffs and debuffs going on. Noblar Flingers, and it's just a picture of a miniature from the tabletop. I like that. So, the Noblar Flingers are a cheap, weak, ranged unit for the ogres that engage at significantly longer range than the hand-thrown weapons of the trappers. An interesting alternative, especially because the trappers are solid in melee, and in addition, the trappers, a lot of times you're going to be taking them for the bear trap debuffs they're going to be giving to enemies, rather than taking them for their ranged capabilities. So the Noblar Flingers are akin to the Skaven Slave Slinger. They're just a smidge braver than the Skaven. Take that, Skaven. The Noblars are braver than you are. They harass enemy units from the safety of the back line. They are specifically best for annoying halberd units. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. They're going to do a fair bit of damage to halberd units that don't have shields. Still, the Celestial Dragon Guard are going to be a problem, though, because Celestial Dragon Guard, of course, takes shields, but nonetheless. That's cool. That is going to fill an interesting spot in the Ogre Kingdom's army list. And it's going to be nice to see an actual Noblar Slinger animation. I bet that will be used by the Noblar Hordes mod that Mixu Lost to Insanity make. So that's going to be cool for them as well. And this article doesn't cover everything being changed. They're also looking at minor tweaks to a couple things, such as the Ice Court recruitment feature, but it showcases the major hits. Okay, I am surprised that there's not actually going to be any campaign mechanic changes to Cathay, though to be honest, I'm not bothered by it. I think Cathay is actually in a pretty good state. The Kislev changes all look great. I am excited to get to grips on this with Kislev. This looks like it will carve out. Sorry. Don't know why this is. It happens every time I'm recording. It's probably the amount of talking that I do. It gets me going. But either which way, this is going to carve out a unique gameplay identity for Kislev, and I will quite enjoy trying that out. I think Krev Assembly has been very much doing well with campaign mechanics as of late, and I am excited to see where this progresses further. I'm very glad to see this. I guess that's what I should say. As for whatever is coming in the future, I assume this means we can probably anticipate, I don't know, 2 months, 3 months out from now, the next DLC. These between DLC updates seem like they're mostly there to keep the players satiated between the DLCs. And the DLCs are taking longer now since there's such a huge amount of content in them. So, I am very curious to see what the next DLC is. I know a lot of people are thinking High Elves, Dark Elves, Slaanesh. I'm hoping not, because while the High Elves and Dark Elves could use a bit of campaign refining to make them more unique, or at least the High Elves could. The Dark Elves have a fair bit going on already, but the High Elves could use a little bit of tweaking. The influence mechanic feels particularly out of date. But I do get... but I don't really want the High Elves and Dark Elves to get the next DLC. I would really prefer that it be Norsca and Vampire counts, as both of them are in really bad states. But Krev Assembly had, in Warhammer 2, they had the philosophy of taking on the easiest jobs first and then moving down. Which is why the Beastmen were the last to get overhauled, and the Warriors of Chaos didn't get overhauled. They waited until Warhammer 3's launch to do that. So, I do really want Norsca and the Vampire Counts to get overhauled, because both of them are in really bad states. But I get why Krev Assembly is holding off on it. With all that said, yeah, 6.1 update sounds great. I'm excited to get on my hands on it. And I suppose I'll see you folks later whenever there's something else worth talking about.